The freeway. It's wide, it's gaping, it gets clogged up, it's loud as hell. People living today, especially the young people, probably can't imagine a city of Portland without a freeway system, much less any other city without a freeway system. Sometimes they're a necessary positive, but sometimes they're a necessary evil. Like how loud you are! Anyway. I don't know too much, I admit, as an amateur historian. I don't know too much about the history of the freeway system in other cities, other states, way off in God knows where. But in terms of the city of Portland, there is a somewhat kind of dark, unfortunate history attributed to a lot of, especially the Portland area's workings in developing their freeway system. Probably a history that a lot of people don't really know too much about. And that's what I want to talk about today. So I want to be walking the somewhat sketchy multi-use path that's been constructed along the freeway, so it's always there, just lingering over this little hill. And we're in a little bunker. A bunker that's often rife with homeless people, but I've noticed it's been very cleared out the past like week or so, so I don't know if maybe there's some stronger regulations being put into place, more frequent searches, but there seems to be a drop recently. But anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about Portland's freeway system. The first big freeway that came through Portland, of course, was I-5. 205 pretty much goes from the fringe of Wilsonville to the south. It goes up into Washington a little ways before it connects with I-5. So its main purpose is to be kind of an east side freeway. And that's gonna give me a copyright strike. Anyway, I don't care, I'm not monetizing this video. So yeah, it was pretty much an offshoot because I-5 predominantly comes up through southwest Portland, and then even when it crosses the river to the east side, it straddles the river, so it's the furthest west portion of East Portland that I-5 goes through. So I-205, which is this freeway, branches off of it and goes east so that it gives people that are more further out East Portland an easier way to commute. And then the extension, I-84, which actually goes all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah, it begins where it merges with I-5 pretty much. And pretty much between where it merges with I-5, which is right by the Rose Quarter and where the Moda Center is, it starts going east. So if people are on 205 and want to get towards I-5, if they're going south, they'll just stay on 205 till it merges. But a lot of people use that I-84 stretch between 205, which is actually not too far up here. That's one of the main routes that people use to go east and west in terms of freeways. And then of course there's I-405, which wraps through kind of the backside of downtown Portland. It's very short. It branches off of kind of where I-5 is just before it starts getting into downtown from the south. Highway 26 that goes to the beach branches off of it, and it just kind of waddles around the backside of Portland, crosses the Fremont Bridge, and then kind of reconnects back with I-5. So kind of like 205, it just serves this like extra purpose. It isn't like an absolutely necessary freeway. But 205, 84, and 405 came along a bit after I-5. I-5 was the first one to come through, and I-5, I mean, it runs from pretty much the border of Mexico to the border of Canada, so it took a long time to build. I think it took like 3 or 4 years to get the Oregon portion done. And it's not like they just started at the California border and worked their way north. But I-5, you know, once, you know, I mean, it was obvious if I-5 was going to go, you know, all the way through Oregon, it was going to have to go through Portland. So, what was I saying?
What's going on? Who are you talking to?
Yeah,
just
I
see him. That multiple pipe area, yeah, that's him.
He played that off a little too well. He got my heart racing for about 10 seconds. Anyway, what the fuck was I talking about? You know, you vlog and people just get way too turned. Anyway, so after that experience, what the hell was I even talking? The freeway. So they knew it was gonna go. It was gonna have to go through Portland, so because it was a main freeway. You know, you're gonna go through the biggest city in Oregon, and it's the early 60s, I think. Like, I want to say, don't hold me to it, I want to say about 63 was when they started working on it in the Portland area. And this ties in very closely to the big documentary that I'm working on now about the history of Albina up in north and northeast Portland. It stands kind of just north of the Rose Quarter. And it was this period where the city of Portland was really pushing itself to progress forward and to become like a city of the future. And they kind of didn't really care what they screwed over in the process. And so by the 1950s, urban renewal became a big thing in this city. And urban renewals, essentially, that area is blighted, that area is blighted, that area is blighted. Those are, you know, kind of a blemish on our city and what people are going to think about us. So we need to completely revitalize those areas. And it really started with the South Auditorium area. I have a video on my channel where I go through the area that used to be the South Auditorium neighborhood, which is just this super blighted, super poverty-ridden, predominantly residential area that a lot of, some immigrants, but a lot of older folks lived in. A lot of older people that were retired and didn't have much money. And they practically wiped that whole neighborhood out, which is why today the more southern part of downtown Portland, the buildings look a lot newer, because most of them don't predate the 1950s at the earliest. And then the city turned to the Albina neighborhood. You know, they wiped out the South Auditorium area. You know, it was full of poor people. Well, then they moved their sights on the Albina area, which was somewhat of a poor neighborhood, but it was also where a lot of Portland's minority population was. So it was like, well, we're not going to mess with all these nice white neighborhoods. So, you know, they obliterated several hundred homes to build the Memorial Coliseum in 1959. And then just a little past it, a little bit north, the city decided to run I-5. They ran it across the river near downtown and ran it along the east bank of the Willamette River. And then as the river started shifting off this way, I-5 just goes straight up. And it cuts right through part of what was essentially the more northwestern part of Albina. But this was almost entirely a residential area. And it was one of those things where voice of the people went unheard because of who those people were. They weren't well-to-do white people. And you know, this is the 1960s. And essentially the freeway was originally known as the Minnesota Freeway. And it's because in that particular area there's lots of streets that run north and south that are named after states. There's Michigan Avenue, there's Montana Avenue, which both run near where the freeway is because it's alphabetical. And the freeway ran right up essentially where Minnesota Avenue ran. There's still parts of Minnesota Avenue that exist today that straddle the west side of the freeway. But that was the primary focus, was they cut right through, I don't know why I'm going towards a busy street, they cut right through Minnesota Avenue, and in the process demoed at least a couple hundred more homes that were just taken. It was eminent domain. These people had their homes taken. They ceased to have property rights because the city decided, we're trying to create progress. We're trying to make the city better and thus making your lives better. Yeah, that's a great argument to put forward. We're trying to make your lives better while we're stealing your home from you. And a lot of this urban renewal stuff happened in the Albina area. And a lot of these people who lost their homes weren't guaranteed new homes. They weren't guaranteed that there would be no financial hardships suffered by them, by this stuff, by their home being taken away. Because they literally had to obliterate every home that was along Minnesota Avenue and just cut that all out and ran the freeway right through the middle of it. So if you're driving on that stretch of I-5, I used to drive it all the time when I go to school at University of Portland, which is almost in St. John's. And once you get past the Rose Quarter, the Fremont Bridge, you'll notice the freeway just becomes a straight shoot. That's where Minnesota Avenue was. So, you know, when you go through there, you think there was hundreds of poor families that were literally booted out of their homes because they had to shoot the freeway through there. And there was another plan that had the freeway staying on the west side. I don't know if they were going to cross over to the east side and then cross back over to the west, maybe somewhere near where like the Fremont Bridge was. But they were going to run it along the west side of the Willamette River, kind of north of downtown. That was in talks with the city. And there's just a lot of industrial stuff there. It's loud there. People are just working there. You know, I-405 goes through there now. It doesn't seem to be killing people. You know, it's one of those things where they had another idea that would have affected far less people and far less directly. But they said the hell with it and ran it literally through a neighborhood. Cut a neighborhood in half. Literally. You know, and when freeways are built, you know, they're always going to mess with something. So somebody's always going to be a little bit screwed when that happens. But just the way the city went about it. And, you know, it's the same old story. You know, if you're well-to-do, you're never inconvenienced. If you're poor, you're inconvenienced every turn you take. And it wasn't just I-5 that this happened with. This also happened with I-205. Much like with I-5, where there was like multiple routes considered. The original plan for I-205 was to run it up roughly, I don't think it was quite 39th. 39th is now Cesar Chavez Boulevard and a pretty well-traveled route, but it was going to run right through there, like in the 30s. Now the issue with that is you're straddling the edge of the Laurelhurst neighborhood, which is a very well-to-do neighborhood, and you know the Buckman neighborhood is kind of just to the south of that. Both very beautiful neighborhoods, but they were also affluent white neighborhoods, you know, especially when they were trying to build this freeway. So conveniently, as the plan is being put forward to make the freeway, which in all fairness, it kind of seems pointless to have a freeway that you're trying to get people east on that close. It's still that close to downtown, only 30 blocks from the Willamette River that bisects east and west sides of Portland, when the city of Portland goes like almost 200 blocks east before it becomes mainly Gresham. So in all fairness, I-205 should have been further east, but that doesn't justify what happened, which was they wanted to build it in an area where there was a lot of more affluent people who of course had influence because they had money and it was the white neighborhood. And of course these people protested and the plan was changed and they ended up moving it further east and built it essentially where I think like 96th was. So they moved it like, you know, 60 blocks east. And you know, neighborhoods like Lentz suffered the impact of that. It bisected that neighborhood, and Lentz, you know, going back many decades, was a very independent kind of area, even when they were annexed by Portland. But yeah, once 205 came through, That area has been struggling. I work on the fringe of the Lens District, and there's a lot of crime, a lot of problems. The main hub, which is 92nd and Foster, they've just packed in a whole bunch of these really expensive lofts and apartments that they're building everywhere, thinking that they're going to sell in an area where nobody has that kind of money. So it was, whoa. It's very much the same thing. It was, they wanted to build in an affluent neighborhood. The affluent people said no, so they were like, okay, we'll move it. But yet when the poor people fight to keep their homes, the city says, screw it, let's just do it anyway, just, they'll have to deal. What are they going to do about it? So that's kind of a running thing, in the city's efforts for urban renewal, which obviously this freeway system is very much a part of that. The ongoing, something wet on me. The ongoing attitude has been, well, of course people are going to complain if it's in their area, but they have to accept it because we're doing what's right for the city. And a lot of what they did was either to the extreme or in some cases not necessary. They didn't need to obliterate all of the South Auditorium area with lots of people who had nowhere else to go. They didn't need to literally obliterate it. There's pictures of it right after that was all obliterated up against the portion of downtown that was still there. And it looks like an atom bomb went off in the southern half of downtown. There's just nothing, And in terms of Albina, taking the biggest hit of urban renewal from the late 50s into the 1970s, I think in the end almost like over 1,000 homes were demolished for 3 main projects, I-5 Freeway being one of them. Over 1,000 homes, many of which housed likely anywhere from 2 to 6 or 7 people. We're talking, 3, 4, 5,000 people. Lives turned upside down because the city pretty much told them, hey, what you want doesn't matter because what we need is more important, what we want is more important. Property rights only matter when we don't want to do something. If we don't want to do anything with your property rights are fine, but if we do want to do something, your property rights cease to exist. And that kind of shit still happens today. I remember there was a massive epidemic of eminent domain stuff going on, like what? 10, 12 years ago in Florida, people getting thrown out, older people getting thrown out of their homes left and right. That kind of stuff still happens. I remember there was a case where a bunch of people got kicked out of their homes, eminent domain, most of them older people, so they could build a shopping mall, because shopping malls are killing it nowadays. Shopping malls, like other businesses, pretty much only really super flourish during Christmas time. Most of the businesses in shopping malls can barely keep their doors open anymore. They're dying left and right. And the ones that already were dying are really dying. So it's, that's the sad, tragic truth behind these freeways we have that we covet, with the exception of it being rush hour. Ooh, I think I'm taking that recliner home with me. And, we managed to cram I-405 in there, and I-405 is a headache, if anything. I can't count how many times I'd gone over the Ross Island Bridge where it converges with all that stuff, and all I want to do is get on I-405, and I end up getting sucked onto Highway 26 going the wrong way. I don't even want to think about how many times that's happened to me. So it's very confusing through that area, and I don't know why they had to make it a freeway. They could have made it more of a highway. It's, it gets a little backed up, but I don't know. I mean, I like that the creation of that freeway brought about the Fremont Bridge. I love the Fremont Bridge, but at what a cost. And I-84, which of course is a prominent freeway, it goes all the way to Utah, so I mean it's not like I-405 where it was just kind of stuck in there. I-405 is like barely, I don't even think it's 2 miles long. But I-84, that was another headache when they built it. Was like, okay, we need to get from 205, almost 100 blocks from downtown Portland, we have to find a way to get that from here to here. It's kind of a problem because it's predominantly residential neighborhoods between here and there, but they had the benefit of free televisions. They had the benefit of, they were able to run it through right through Sullivan's Gulch. There's an area where the ground just kind of dropped, and there was already railroad lines going through there. So it was more of an industrial region than a residential one. And they were able to just kind of run I-84 parallel with it. And that benefited us with our, MAX lines later on, because now the MAX runs right alongside those railroad tracks between them and I-84. But, one of the negatives of having to cram a freeway route into a small area is I-84 is extremely narrow, and it's windy, and it's that way because it has to be. It has to be narrow because they only had so much space to work with, and it has to be windy because, they had to squeeze it in between stuff. It runs right along the huge Providence Hospital. They had to meander it around that. There's a place where 82nd that I'm on now runs into Halsey, and it's like these big streets converging. And, they had to meander the freeway through all that. Like, there was really no other way to do it if they were going to do it through there. So, I-84 is known for being very backed up because it's not as wide as other freeways, but it's also known for having a lot of accidents because people get on there and they think, all right, I'm on the freeway, I can drive as fast as I want to. Problem is, it's so windy and tight and closed off in there that, people take a turn too tight, they skid into other cars. Most of the freeway, it's like if you're in a lane right now, there's a wall like right here that you're straddling. So if you lose control a little bit, you're going to go into the wall and bounce off of it and hit somebody else. I mean, it's a very crazy, disorganized freeway route. But seeing as it's predominantly lined with more open space and commercial properties and industrial stuff, I don't really think too many homes were lost when that was built. I'm sure some were. But that's the biggest issue with I-84 and that little stretch between 205 and I-5 is it can be a death trap if you don't have your eyes fully open 10 and 2, no matter what. You're going to get into an accident. There's a lot of accidents. I remember in the 90s, there was like a big truck that didn't turn right or, did this and hooked and smashed into something and just blew the hell up. And I remember somebody took a picture of it from an overpass, and it's just dead stop traffic on I-84 and this huge just ball of fire blowing up out of this thing. So yeah, kind of freaking scary. So yeah, especially today, I understand we need the freeways. It just sucks that in terms of all these things that have come about over the years, these advancements we've made, we went from unpaved roads to paved roads to highways to freeways to, electric, max train lines, and so, from little train cars putting along and old trolleys. But it just sucks that it seems every time we want to build something new, the poor people, the minority population, that sect of our society is always the ones that have to make the sacrifices for it. I know that's America. It's always been America, but that doesn't mean it always has to be. And it sucks, and it's bullshit, no matter what way you shake it up, So anyway, when you're driving down your friendly local freeways in this town, pay your respects, And with all that said, until next time, guys, It's been Steve the Amateur Historian, and I'll see you next time.